My 30th birthday marked the end of a year-long daily writing challenge. For 365 days, I wrote every single day, no matter what, no matter how tired I was, no matter what else happened. Except for once, but we'll talk about that later. But first things first, let me take you back to how this all started. The night before my 29th birthday, I cried. Not because I was turning 29, but because I was going to be turning 30 in just 1 year, and at my current stage in life, there was just nothing worthwhile that I would be able to accomplish in just 1 year before I turned 30. How about publication? Miles away. A successful YouTube channel? Stop kidding yourself. You could always buy a house. In this market? Face it, girl, there's nothing worthwhile you can accomplish by the time you're 30, and as such, you're going to be a failure forever. Now, you might be thinking that the idea that you need to accomplish something worthwhile by the time you're 30 is complete and utter bullshit, and you would be right, of course, but you try telling me that on the night of my 29th birthday, okay? One idea that floated my mind is that if I couldn't become a published author by the time I was 30, maybe at least I could become a writer, at least in my head. And the way I wanted to do that was by writing every single day. And as you can imagine, that was very ambitious, and I just got it lately, almost immediately. Which brings me to the first lesson I learned during this challenge. Now at this point, given the obvious title and intro to this video, you might be expecting me to say something along the lines of how I faced my demons, I decided that actually it wasn't impossible at all, and I rolled up my sleeves, I settled down, and I set about writing every single day for a year. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The moment that idea floated my head, I thought it was impossible. I thought there is no point attempting this, I am not even going to hype myself up, and we're not gonna do it. It's not gonna happen. But what did happen is that on my 29th birthday, I woke up and I felt like working on my book, so I worked on my book. And then the day after, I worked on my book again. And while I thought the idea of writing every single day for a year was impossible, it just wouldn't quite leave my mind. So I didn't tell anyone, I didn't even tell my boyfriend for the first couple of weeks, and I just kinda tried writing the next day as well, and then the next day, and then after a week I'd realized that I'd written every single day for a week, which I don't think I had done that in years. And eventually I just sort of kept going, and I always had that idea in my mind of, oh, I'm gonna keep this up until I turn 30, but I never put enough pressure on myself for it to feel like that was the goal, and that is honestly what made it possible for this to happen in the first place. I've never been big on word count goals, and I didn't set one during this year either. Instead, my goal was simple. Spend 10 minutes every day in front of my draft in whatever shape or form that happens to take that day. And a lot of the times this involved zero writing. I would just sit there and brainstorm, I would problem solve, I would reread the previous day's work, I would just think about the book in some way or another. And I have to admit, after a few weeks, I stopped doing 10 minutes. Because I noticed something kinda interesting, and that is that on the days where I was really tired and I really felt like I was forcing myself to write, I would consistently move away from my document and check the timer after 7 minutes. It was always 7 minutes. I either worked above 7 minutes or I went to my timer to check how much I had left, and I'd written for 7 minutes exactly. So this just felt like a natural stopping point to me. I started out by forcing myself to work for those extra 3 minutes, but it just wasn't worth it. So once I changed the goal to 7 minutes a day, that was truly the minimum, and I can proudly say that I never did any less than 7 minutes. That was the gold standard. And some days I would be really tired, I would write for 7 minutes and then that'd be it. But other days I just wouldn't check the timer, I would keep going and I would write whatever felt natural, and then I would end up doing half an hour, I would end up doing an hour. Even on days where I had gone to work and I was really tired, I found that sometimes I couldn't tell how tired I was until I started writing. And some days when I saw I had energy, I ended up only writing for 7 minutes, and other days I was really tired but somehow ended up doing a 1 hour session because I got really into it. But as long as I sat down to write for 7 minutes, that was enough. And the amount of added up progress that I could make in that time was so much more than I was hoping for. I didn't realize just how much I could do in that little bit of time. What you need to understand here is that before this challenge, I used to be pretty much exclusively a weekend writer. If someone was doing a stream during the week, I might try and write during one of the sprints, but most of my writing happened on the weekend. And what that meant for me is that on Saturday I would probably spend 1 to 2 hours refamiliarizing myself with the draft. Because life gets in the way, so sometimes I would even skip a weekend, which means I wouldn't write for 2 weeks straight. And then it took so much effort to just reread my notes, reread my outline, reread the last chapter and figure out what I was doing, what the voice of the project was, where I left off. And I found that the one thing that I gained the most from this challenge was actually not about how much progress I made and how much I increased my writing quantity, but about how much I increased my writing efficiency. That little bit of daily contact, even on weeks where I only wrote for 7 minutes a day, Monday to Friday, meant that when I sat down to write on Saturday, I knew what I was doing. I knew exactly where I was, I knew what I needed to do next, and I was excited to work on it because I didn't have to spend an hour refamiliarizing myself with the draft, so I didn't dread sitting down to write. I can spend so much less time writing now and make the same amount of progress I was previously making in terms of word counts, number of chapters and that sort of thing. I don't track that sort of thing, but it felt like I was making more progress in much less time. And this new increased efficiency due to that daily contact made it more fun as well. It just made it so that I was actually making progress on the story faster, which made it feel more satisfying. I got further in the story, so I wasn't stuck on certain scenes. I was always excited to see what would happen next in the story. I feel like this challenge has healed my relationship with writing, and the daily contact has definitely been the biggest game changer for that. The next thing I want to talk about is guilt, specifically the guilt of not writing. I'm someone that dreams of being a published author one day, and this is something that I want with every fibre of my being. So whenever I spent the weekend not working on my book, it felt like I just wasted the entire weekend. And even on weekends where I did work on my book, because it took me so long to get back into the story, it never felt like I'd made enough progress to really justify it. It felt like I wasn't working hard enough, I didn't want to be a writer badly enough, and I felt guilty for putting my dream aside whenever I worked on anything else. And funnily enough, writing every day, even though I was putting more pressure on myself to write daily, completely decreased the pressure I felt to make progress in my book on the weekends. First of all, it was so much easier to actually get ahead in the book on the weekends because I didn't have to do any figuring things out as much, but also the goal was 7 minutes a day now. And if I had other plans on a Saturday, if I wanted to go out or do something else, I could write for 7 minutes and move on with my day. And while on most Saturdays I still did far more than that, I'd never given myself that option before. Every single Saturday I felt like I had to write, I had to make progress, and now that pressure sort of melted away as I realized that I'd already put so much progress in throughout the week, and I was probably gonna put in some progress on Sunday. Skipping a day no longer felt like a big deal. Because I wasn't skipping it, I still had those 7 minutes of daily contact, and I felt like I regained so much of my time back, and I just started feeling so much better in myself, both as a writer and as a human being. You know that moment when you're in bed sort of drifting asleep and you come up with the most genius idea that you just have to get up and write it all down? I found that those moments stopped being a rare treat and became almost a weekly occurrence. And I think that's because I was telling my brain, hey, I care about this story, I'm working on this story, I'm working on this problem. And my subconscious mind then continued working on the story and on the problem when I wasn't actively working on it. Even more interestingly than that, I actually found that those moments of little bursts of spontaneous magical inspiration weren't limited to my bedtime anymore. I found that just sitting down to write on the days where I was really tired after work actually made me come up with ideas. Like apparently being on the verge of falling asleep in front of my computer and lying in bed are equivalents, who would have thought, right? But I came up with so many ideas that I don't think I would have thought of if I wasn't writing daily. In fact, I think my story is better for the fact that I was writing daily. There are so many little nuggets of inspiration and little changes that I've made that were entirely reliant on those moments where I sat down when I didn't think that I could. The idea of a writing streak is, funnily enough, something that scared me. I never wanted to call what I was doing a writing streak. I just don't like the concept. As a Duolingo survivor, there's something about the word streak that just makes me think of owls. And I think to really understand where I'm coming from here, I need to share my Duolingo history with you. Spoiler alert, it's super embarrassing, please don't judge me, but I had an over 400-day streak on Duolingo once. And before you congratulate me, what you need to understand is that most of those days were fake. Especially for the last few months of that streak, I would go in every night before bed and do the easiest lesson on the Duolingo page that I could. I was way further along in the levels, but I would go all the way back to level 1 and I would relearn how to say hello, good afternoon, how are you doing? Just to get through the lesson, just to get a streak, and then tell myself that the next day I would do a difficult level and actually study French. I don't even want to start to psychoanalyze what on earth is wrong with me to do that sort of thing, but we move on. Then on day 456 of my streak, I went to bed at 1 a.m. and because my habit was to do my daily French fake practice right before I went to bed, I missed the midnight deadline and I lost my streak. The next day I deleted the app and I haven't studied French since. So why would someone with that history choose to do a challenge like this one, you might ask? Other than because I'm slightly mad, I genuinely did just want to build up the writing habit with this challenge. I wasn't interested in how many days I could go as opposed to how much writing every day would change my life. But at the same time, I couldn't feel but be a little bit nervous about what would happen if I broke the streak. Would I then pick it up the next day or would I abandon writing forever? Funnily enough, my answer actually came on a random Saturday, the least likely day for anyone to break a writing streak. I really thought if this happened, it would be during a deadline week at work, midweek. I really did not think it would happen on a Saturday. But on that particular Saturday, it was the hottest day in the UK that year. I had been invited to a co-worker's barbecue and because I'm a people-pleasing person, I spent the morning baking, so I didn't write. Because of course, being next to an oven for the entire morning on the hottest day of the year is a great idea. And then I went and spent the day in the sunshine next to a fire on a barbecue, and my plan was I had emailed myself a couple of notes on the brainstorming that I was doing, and I was just gonna do some brainstorming on the train home. Unfortunately, I never took the train home because I started really not feeling well and someone drove me home. I arrived and basically immediately was sick all over the bathroom. Couldn't get warm, like it was 35 degrees outside and I was shivering like crazy, and then I passed out under a bunch of blankets. So here's your daily reminder to stay safe in the heat. Heat is dangerous. Wear sun cream, stay out of the sun, don't be stupid. But needless to say, I didn't write that day. But I did write the day after, and then I wrote again the day after that, and I realized that I really didn't care that I'd missed my streak. I just cared about the result and the consistency, and I just kept going, and I felt so much better after realizing that breaking the streak wasn't going to break my writing habit. I apologize if the angle has jumped around a little bit. I think the camera heard me talking about heat waves and decided to overheat. So, another unexpected lesson for me was the mindset shift that I experienced as a result of this challenge. I've always been someone that's really secretive about her writing. I don't like sharing many details about my books online and outside of online circles with my real life non-writing connections. I share even less. And I think a big part of that is because I've been embarrassed to call myself a writer when I only really write on weekends and sometimes not even that, and I've never published anything, and I've been working on the same book for like 1,000 years and it's not going anywhere. And having this challenge as something that I do every single day made it easier for me to call myself a writer in front of other people, and also have something to talk about when my writing gets brought up with other people. So if someone starts poking about what I'm writing about, I can now divert their attention to, oh yeah, I'm doing a daily writing challenge for a year and I'm writing for 7 minutes every day. As opposed to having to say something more along the lines of, no, I haven't published anything, you can't read my work, and no, I'm not going to tell you what my books are about, thanks for asking. Makes for a lot less awkward small talk, and it just made me feel so much more comfortable to share the fact that I write with other people without having that little mental block. The periods where I struggled the most keeping up my writing habit was, funnily enough, in between projects. I would finish one project, I would celebrate that day, and then the next day I had to start something else, and I had to know what I would be working on. And it was just like change from one thing to the next very, very quickly and then jump into the next project. And I found that really difficult, and I also found it a bit unnecessary. The key thing that I've gained from this daily writing challenge is that daily contact, that writing every day on the same book and being very present with that book and knowing that I'm not going to forget where I am in that book. And that does not apply when I change from one story to another story. And I think in the future I will not be doing that. I will be taking some time off in between books to give my brain a chance to catch up, really. Something that I really want to address is that it does get so much easier. I truly, when I started, did not believe that I could write after work. From the beginning, the main strategic advantage I wanted from this challenge was that daily contact. It was keeping the story fresh in my mind so that I could write better on the weekend. I didn't think that I would actually be able to write for longer periods of time in the evening after work. I work full-time as an engineer. My job is very mentally challenging. I do a lot of maths, I do a lot of problem solving, and writing, as much as I love it, is also really mentally challenging and involves not maths, but it does involve a lot of problem solving. So I've always thought I just don't have the ability to work for 8 hours in a day, sometimes more, and then get home and write. It's too much. I can't do it. But I did think that I probably had the ability to do the writing for 10 minutes a day. But I really didn't think I could do more than that. And the more I found myself doing this writing after work, the more I tried to write every single day, the easier it got, and the more energy I found that I had after work to dedicate to this. Some weeks' work truly was very stressful and 7 minutes a day was all that I could manage, but there were weeks where I could write for an hour a day during the week, and I've never been able to do that before. And I genuinely think that consistency is a skill, and it's a skill that you can learn, and you can learn to have that much more energy. You can learn for things to become easier to you if they are hard now. I never thought that the progress I would make Monday to Friday would actually make a difference, but it really does, and I'm really proud of that. The day before my 30th birthday was the 365th day of my daily writing challenge. Out of those 365 days, I wrote for 364 days, and that day was also the 316th day of a writing streak. But on my 30th birthday, I didn't write, and I didn't write on purpose. I didn't want this turning into another Duolingo situation. I wanted to break the streak on my own terms, to remind myself that not writing every single day is perfectly normal. It is in fact what most people do, and I am allowed days off. After all, it was never about the streak, right? But despite the fact that I wrote the streak on purpose, I am still intending on keeping this up after the challenge. I genuinely think that this is the best thing I've ever done for myself, for my own creative freedom, for my dreams, for everything that I believe in. I am genuinely so happy that I did this and that I kept it up, and I am so proud of myself. I am genuinely just so proud of myself. But having said that, I am going to be making some changes in how I approach the daily writing from now on, because while I want to keep this up, I would like to do maybe a slightly less intense version of what I've been doing. For example, as I said earlier, I will be taking some time in between projects and in between drafts. I think that's a very good thing for me to do. I think it's nice to celebrate the fact that I finished something and give myself some time to really sit with that achievement and not just go one thing to the other like that. I think it will make finishing stages of a project feel more special and give me more time to work on other creative hobbies, because I have more things going on in my life than writing a book. The other thing I will probably avoid doing is writing during work trips, because last time I went on a work trip, it was only for 2 nights, but I didn't want to take my laptop, so I printed off the last few chapters that I'd written and I took them with me, and in the hotel room after a 14-hour workday, I was line editing at night before going to bed. I was so tired. It was not worth it. I'm not doing that again. That very much felt like I was doing it for the challenge and to be able to say that I'd written every day in a year, but I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. And I think going forwards, what I actually want to set as my goal is just writing for 6 days out of 7 in a week. I think that would be a really healthy goal that still keeps up that consistency and keeps up that almost daily contact, but allows me some leeway to do other things with myself. Then again, 7 minutes a day really is not that much. It should be fairly easy to keep this up. I just want to be a little bit softer on myself. And then the other thing that I want to try going forwards is I genuinely think that this challenge has healed my relationship with writing. I think I feel so much better about my writing and my creativity after doing this. I feel so much more confident that I can write a book and keep up a long writing project. And also I just enjoy it more now. So I am curious as to whether I can apply these lessons to some of my other creative hobbies. Like, for example, I'm very tempted to start a daily drawing challenge at some point. I want to figure out a good month to do that. It will not be going on for a year. I might do it for a month, but yeah, I would like to try that perhaps. Now don't you worry, I'm not gonna leave you hanging. This is me we're talking about, and obviously I time tracked every single minute of writing that I did over the last year, and I also time tracked every single minute that I did over the year before. So we have something to compare against as well. So, and I wrote some notes on here with my exact statistics. During the year of daily writing, so between my 29th birthday and my 30th birthday, this is gonna get so confusing, I wrote for a total of 208 hours. The year just before that, so between my 28th birthday and my 29th birthday, I wrote for 150 hours. So that's almost 60 hours more that I've written this year, that I've been writing every day compared to previously. This also means that my daily writing has increased from 25 minutes per day to 35 minutes per day, which a 10-minute increase doesn't sound like that much. I think the biggest difference that this challenge has really made is the efficiency of my writing. So even if it's just 10 minutes more, actually the entirety of those 35 minutes per day has felt like I was writing more efficiently, I was in my story more, and the whole writing has just felt a lot better this year. The previous year, so during the time that I was 28, I wrote for 153 days, which is 42% of the days in a year. In comparison, last year I wrote for 364 days, which is 99.7 of the days in a year. That is insane. If you're curious, here are 2 of the graphs of how this compares on a month-to-month basis. Now bear in mind here my birthday is on the 5th of May, so the starting month of May and the ending month of May are sort of not full months, and they're not like very evened out. So this is set up to be between my birthday to my next birthday, so the final month of May is just 5 days. And here's also a breakdown of what I was actually working on over the last 2 years and how that lines up. So as you can see, during the year in which I was 28, I was primarily working on the first book in my trilogy. and during the year in which I was 29, I was primarily working on the second book in my trilogy, which makes sense if you think about it, but actually I do jump back and forth between them, so the fact that they're chronological is an entire coincidence. And in between both years, I was also working on Project Voice, which is my middle grade Wuxi palette cleanser project that I sometimes use in between drafts of my main project. And I was honestly surprised when going back over these statistics of it really doesn't feel that different, like the number of projects, the amount of work feels very evened out when you look at time alone, and I kind of wish that I had tracked my word count and my actual progress in the draft, because I genuinely feel like that's been so much more, but unfortunately I didn't, so you're gonna just have to take my word for that one. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching, and if I can leave you with just one thing, it's consistency is a superpower, but it's a superpower that can be learned, and I 100% believe in you. Go write your book, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.